I'm insanely a big fan of the Addams Family franchise. Like, I'm pretty sure I've consumed every piece of Addams Family media that has been able to be consumed, like pretty much everything. So what I thought it'd be really fun to do is do a deep dive on the Addams Family franchise, starting all the way back with the original sitcom. So let's do a deep dive into the Addams Family TV show. The Addams Family series premiered Friday, September 16th, 1964. I was the ripe old age of 400 at that point. I'm kidding. I don't know how old I was in 1964. The Addams Family was based off of a New Yorker comic by Charles Addams. I would love to do a deep dive about the comic series as well. Let me know down in the comments if you think I should do a deep dive on the Addams Family comics as well. But today we're talking about the sitcom's very first episode, The Addams Family Goes to School. This episode follows the idea of a truancy officer comes to the Addams' house and wants to send the children to school. This is a very common storyline that would be repeated very many times throughout the series, including in episode 3 of the new Addams Family series. It would play a pretty similar storyline, if not almost the same script, as well as seeing a very similar plot in the animated film from 2019. This story has been very commonly reused about having to send the children into public schools or sending them out into the actual world. You could even say that on the pilot of Wednesday, a very similar concept is kind of developed with sending Wednesday to Nevermore. This is a very smart storytelling point of view, though, because really as a kid, the first time you are introduced to people who aren't from your family are very often from going to school for the first time. So as the story is very much kind of put the children out of their comfort zone, this is a very good way to show there is a bigger world outside of your family. We start the episode off with the most iconic theme song. I can't play it obviously because I don't want to get like copyright struck, but you know the one, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da da dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. The creepy and the kooky, they're all together ooky, mysterious and spooky. The Addams Family, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da da dum. You know the one. Everyone knows that song. At least I hope you do. If not, look it up. It's great. The next shot we see is an establishing wide shot of the Addams Family home. I don't want to get too nitpicky, but in this very first shot, they do cut off part of the house, which I think is a shame because we all know the character of the house is almost as iconic as the family itself, which is strange because later on in the episode, they show the full house. So I can't help but wonder if maybe the first shots out, they didn't have the budget to build the whole house yet, or if this was just something they overlooked because they didn't realize how big a character the house would end up becoming in the long term. In the very next scene, we see a mailman bringing mail to the Addams home. The mailbox is then opened from the inside by Fing, who grabs the mail and pulls it in, essentially showing us that the family is not like other families. Also, I do feel like this scene is recreated a couple times. I want to say it was in the Addams Family reunion movie. You can see a mailman kind of like fighting with a mailbox or something along those lines. So it's very a common trope they kind of do with the mailbox. Also, the first time we see Fing, icon. It is funny because back in the original series, Fing was a arm in a box, and sometimes you would see like more than just the hand. Later on, we do see it as a kind of hand by itself that is kind of not attached to anything, but in the original series, you would just see like an arm reaching out of things. So in theory, we kind of see a different side of Thing in this adaptation of the Addams Family. We are then thrusted into the storyline when we see the truancy officer coming to the house asking about the Addams children, establishing that they have never stepped foot in a school.
You going in there?
I'm the truant officer. They've got 2 kids who have never set foot in school.
Good luck, Charlie.
We then get to see the gate, which is something that moves on its own, letting people in and out, closing behind itself. In later versions of the Addams Family, this gate is a much bigger physical entity, much more of a kind of taller gate, but right now it's kind of like a very small kind of gate. But it's the first time we really see gate, which is kind of fun. The first member of the actual Addams Family that we meet is Wednesday, a very small, very young Wednesday.
Hello.
Well, hello.
This Wednesday is a very different adaptation of the character of Wednesday. She hasn't really been as fleshed out yet, as we will see in later series. She is a little more distant and a little bit more of the blank stares, which is who she really is kind of known for later on as we move further into the franchise. But right now she is a little more social, a little more interactive, and slightly more friendly, which there's 2 different versions of Wednesday, you could say, and this is definitely the first one we see, so she's very different than what we get to know later on in the franchise.
You must be one of the Addams children.
I'm Wednesday.
I'm Mr. Hilliard.
Mr. Hilliard is then invited into the home where we get to see the Addams' eclectic style with lots of different types of things, including the taxidermy rug of a bear which growls when you step on it, and also seeing a swordfish with a foot in its mouth, which is very iconic and I absolutely love it. I would love to own one of those. Obviously, I don't want real ones because that's gross. Not for me personally, no judgment, but I would love just like a fake replica or something because that'd be so fun. We are then introduced to Pugsley Addams.
Wednesday.
This adaptation of Pugsley, he is older. I believe he is presented as 8. This is one of the few times we actually do see Pugsley as an older brother, which in later adaptations he will become the younger brother, which is a whole nother video unto itself. But I think this is one of the few times we see him as older. Possibly in the animated series he might also be older. Don't quote me on that, but right now he is older than Wednesday.
Here, I fixed it for you. Pugsley's very handy.
Pugsley is very handy according to Wednesday. He removed Marie Antoinette's head for her from her doll.
Fixed it. That doll doesn't have a head.
It's Marie Antoinette. Grandmama told us about the French Revolution, and Pugsley chopped off her head.
I also thought this was a very clever way to show that the children are learning things. They do bring up that the reason she named the doll Marie Antoinette and cut off its head is because they're learning about the French Revolution. Grandmama is teaching them things at home. It's not that they are not learning things. It's not like they're just skipping school. They are learning from home, which as a homeschool kid, I appreciate this. We love that. So this is just a very fun way of making her doll kind of show us in world without having to tell us that they are learning things. We are getting very much an explanation that she is learning things and that they are doing things at home that would help them grow and get more knowledge under their belt. Next, we are introduced to Morticia, who is tending to her garden in the greenhouse. We get to see a lot of her fun plants, including poison ivy and all kinds of different plants that you wouldn't see normally. I don't think we get to meet Cleopatra yet, at least not by name. But right now she's just tending to the plants, very focused on that, very welcoming. She doesn't really get too upset that Mr. Hilliard's there. She's just more kind of like talking about her plants and kind of saying like, hey, you know, I'm working with my plants. They're not looking so great. The children are growing great, but my plants could use some help.
They've got to attend school. It's the law.
Oh, I'd love to discuss that with you, Mr. Hilliard. But you see, I can't. You must speak to my husband.
Mr. Hilliard then says it's the law that the children have to go to school. And Morticia says, oh, the law, that's my husband's thing. Go talk to him. This part's really fun because this is the first time we then see Lurch. Lurch's hand comes over and grabs Mr. Hilliard on the shoulder. And this is actually a very funny gag because it's the first time we get a shock like, oh my gosh, is this beautiful Morticia married to this big lurching guy? Which is actually a fun reference to the original comics. The first time we see Morticia, she is with her husband, who is a big, scary lurching guy who does not look like Gomez quite yet. In the comics, it was one of those things where they hadn't decided what Gomez was going to look like yet, so they kind of were trying out different styles, but it's a fun little homage that the first time we see like her husband or the guy that she's supposed to be with is actually Lurch. It's like a fun little joke. Then Lurch leads Mr. Hilliard to the study so we can see Gomez. And it's fun because this shot is really quite beautiful. You see the two doors, we see Lurch open them, it's very nice, and then they imply that's gonna be very scary almost. Like it's very much like, oh, we're gonna see the husband and he's gonna be like very strict and very stern. But then we cut to Gomez's big smile. He's playing with his trains. He's having a good time. He's not like the other dads from the time period. And it's a very fun way to establish that Gomez is going to be a very likable character to follow throughout the series. Also, fun fact, so in the original comic strip, they did not actually give the Addams characters names, at least not all of them, and when it came to the father, they weren't really sure what to name him yet. And so Charles Addams had two different names. One that was Rapelli and one was Gomez. It was actually Gomez's actor, John Aston, who chose the name Gomez. He liked that one better, and that's why we got the character's name as Gomez. I mean, I wasn't actually on set that day, but that's a story I heard or read. The truancy officer then tells Gomez, yet again, the children need to go to school. It's the law. They need to get going to school. And Gomez says, don't worry about education. Mama's already teaching them everything they need to know. This is yet again establishing they are learning things. They are not just at home doing nothing. These children are learning what they need to be learning.
Ma tutors the children in all the fine arts, music, painting, ballet. She's the long hair of the family and a fantastic dart player.
The next shot, we are then introduced to Mama and Uncle Fester, or Grandmama and Uncle Fester.
You only got 10 points. I nipped him in the ear, didn't I?
Their lineage gets a little weird for both of them. Mama in the original series is presented as Gomez's mother, so she's like Mama Addams or Grandmama Addams, depending on who's saying it. This is kind of changed back and forth a little bit as you move forward. It's a little hard to keep track of. At some point, I think I will have to do a deep dive onto Mama and her origins, or Mama and whose parent she actually is, because they switch back and forth depending on which version you're watching. In the 90s films, she is, I believe, presented as Morticia's mother. It's very loosely said that Gomez and Fester's parents have graves in the cemetery because Morticia wishes that the children can meet them. And it's also just very much heavily implied that Mama is Morticia's mother in that, kind of like a mother-in-law type situation. But then later on in the animated films, we then go back to seeing Mama as Gomez's mother because Morticia has a problem with her mother-in-law showing up. And also her parents have urns, and Morticia talks to them through a crystal ball at some point, so her parents are believed to be passed on. So there are like two different Mamas, I believe, depending on which storyline you want to go with. You either have Mama Addams or Granny Frump. So I believe this version that we first meet is Grandmama Addams. And I believe later on in the sitcom, we do meet Granny Frump later on. So right now, this is Gomez's mother. But here's the weird part and the other kind of strange thing about lineage. Uncle Fester in this version is Morticia's uncle. So technically, this is Fester Frump, not Fester Addams. Do you go out of their way to say that Morticia's uncle Fester, and so he's actually considered Morticia's uncle and then the children's great uncle? So weird little change, but just something to keep an eye out for this. But that's a little fun thing that we can play around with. Also, I would love to do a deep dive on Fester and his origins also. Mama and Fester end up scaring off Mr. Hillard while they're playing darts, and Mr. Hillard like runs out freaked out that they're throwing darts and all that stuff. And from what I hear, Mama is a very good dart player.
When he blew up the bridge and that big monster they call a butler, he would have frightened Frankenstein.
Mr. Hillard then tries to pass off the case to somebody else. He does not want to do it. He will not go back to the Addams' house. He won't do it. It's not for him. All's well in the Addams house now. The children are playing. Morticia's knitting. Lurch is playing the piano. Everybody's having a great old time.
The mail's in.
Never mind, Lurch. I'll get it.
Then the mail comes in. This part I thought was really kind of cute, actually, is despite Lurch being the butler, he is playing the piano, and they're all just chilling, hanging out, and he gets up to go get the mail, and Wednesday says, "Don't worry about it, Lurch, I'll get it," which I really thought that was a nice touch. Despite being a very rich family who has like a butler and all those things, they're very much down to earth. Lurch is still part of the family. Even though he is their butler, they do treat him like family. He's not expected to do all the work, do all the chores. The children get things, and it was just a very nice way of showing that at the end of the day, the kids are still going to take care of Lurch too. He's part of their family. It's not just blood for them. It's very much everyone's welcome in their family. Wednesday then brings Morticia a letter from the school insisting that the children go to school.
Oh, isn't that sweet?
What is it, Tish?
The Sherwood School insists that we enroll the children immediately. You must have made a very good impression on that Mr. Hilliard.
Fester thinks this is a bad idea. You do not need to go to school, according to Fester. You can learn everything at home, just like he did. And then he goes to show off his light bulb trick, which is a very iconic Fester thing.
Beautiful. I can even make it blink.
I found out how they did this. So what they did is they hollowed out the light bulb and put a little flashlight in there, and then they had the actor bite down on the little switch so they could flicker it and stuff like that. Do not try that at home. I'm telling that for myself also. Don't do that at home. Sounds dangerous. But that's how they got that trick, so that's fun to know.
Morticia, you can't send the children to school. I'll be lost without them.
Gomez, I've seen little Wednesday looking out the fence at the other children. I think she wants to play with them.
Despite all of this, Morticia has made up her mind and she is sending the kids to school. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The kids are going to school. So despite everyone having a bit of worry, they do bring the children down to the school. They bring them in, send the kids into their first class. They have a fun little kind of side storyline where Gomez gets along with the teachers, and they all kind of make jokes about what they would do to the superintendent. They could do whatever. They could hire a guy to put some sense into him. Gomez then spends the rest of the afternoon pacing around, worried for the children. He truly misses them. I love Gomez's mindset when it comes to children. Why have children if you're just going to send them away? So on some level, he really does miss his children and wants to have them around.
Ridiculous. Why have children just to get rid of them? I'm opposed to the whole nonsense.
Wednesday then comes home crying, screaming, tantruming, runs in the house, hissy fit. Honestly, love this energy. If we could get this for Wednesday season 2, iconic. I would love to see we just have a full like meltdown. Like she's losing it, she's over it, she's not having it. Wednesday then informs Gomez that they killed the dragon. Gomez says, who would kill a dragon? And Wednesday says, in the storybook, the knight in the shining armor came and killed the dragon. And Morticia and Gomez are over that. They don't love that. They don't want their kids learning about that. And I agree with them. I love dragons. Dragons don't deserve that. They're sweet, beautiful creatures. And like the Addams are not putting up with this. Morticia said, that's it. I'm calling Mr. Hillard. He's a good man who he liked us. He's going to listen to what we have to say. Morticia's like 100% like, oh, Mr. Hillard's going to have our back on this issue. So they call him up. Fun little moment. They do their first real hard cut to Mr. Hillard saying, I'm not going back. You can't make me go back. So funny, so iconic. Really a good way. Even back like earlier kind of adaptations, they use a jump cut for comedy, which I thought was so clever, very fun. Wednesday comes running down going, I wonder if Mr. Hillard really will come by. Don't worry, your father sent Lurch, and Lurch can be very persuasive when he wants to be. Which, honestly, I can get that. I can see that. Fun little fact, which I would love to explore later on down the series, but Lurch was actually considered a heartthrob by certain people. He had, like, a fan base. They literally wrote a song. Like, he had a single out, and it did really well. They called it The Lurch. And he was, like, a heartthrob, and his fans, like, loved him. And I'm like, I get it. He's awesome. And like he was like what 6'9" or something like that. I think in the show's canon, Lurch is 7 feet tall, but I believe the actor is 6'9". Either way, tall guy, great fans, beautiful musical talents from what I hear. That's awesome. So yeah, he's very persuasive. But Lurch carries Mr. Hillard in. You know, here we go, you rang kind of thing. Iconic. So the truancy officer, Mr. Hillard, then has to listen to what the Addams say about the violence. They are over it. They do not want the violence to be taught in school.
There are some things we just can't tolerate.
Like what?
Like violence.
Well, what's wrong with a little violence?
The kind they're teaching the children at school.
You did say teaching the children in school?
Come now, Mr. Hilliard. Let's not pretend.
Have you read your friend Grimm lately?
Those harmless little fairy tales?
Harmless? Killing a poor, defenseless dragon?
There are no real dragons.
What gave you that impression?
Despite being a little freaked out by being back in the Addams' house and being brought there by Lurch, he listens. He listens to what they have to say about this violence.
Is that what you want to feed little children?
Of course not.
Why don't you just run right down to the school board and tell them to do something about it?
Well, I'm beginning to think you've got something.
You are? Another drink for Mr. Hilliard.
No, please.
Thinking like theirs can change the world and save the world.
Something must be done. From dragons to toy guns to real guns to bombs to atom bombs. You don't want... Thinking like yours can save the world.
This episode's really nice because the truancy officer does seem to learn the lesson of the whole show. Is that they are just people who are trying to take care of their family, and at the end of the day, they have good points sometimes.
I must confess, I misjudged you people completely. Thank you.
I can't imagine that Mr. Hillard will be going to the Addamses for like Sunday dinner, but definitely everybody learned a little bit more about each other. The Addams learned more that the children probably should be in some sort of school environment so they can kind of learn from others, but also Mr. Hillard learned that there are other points of view. Not everybody believes dragons should be the villains. Sometimes you need to take care of all creatures. The episode does end with Morticia getting a call from the school, and they tell her that Mr. Hillard pled their case and that they are going to be removing the violence from the books, and they're going to try to pull some of the violence out of the curriculum, which is a very big move. And so Morticia says, yes, the children will be at school tomorrow. So everybody learned their lesson, and the school is trying to improve what they are teaching, especially because it is somewhat violent. Despite only being a half-hour long show, this script really did a pretty good express hero's journey. We start off with a good inciting incident, we have our ups, we have our downs, we have our hills, we have our valleys, but by the end of it, everyone has returned home learning a new lesson. The world has now changed forever. You can't go in, like, no one can go back. Essentially, everyone has changed and grown from this time period. Also, I find it really interesting that this cast is actually a very large cast, and for the most part, all of them are pretty much skillfully used. Everyone has their place and they make sense to be there. If I want to get nitpicky, I guess Fester and Mama could be kind of interchangeable in this, but this show is supposed to make you feel very safe and comfortable at home with a big group and a big family. So it makes sense that you would want to have like extended family members there, but for the most part, everyone is pretty much used very well. We have the father who really does want to keep his children home and doesn't want to send them out. The mother who is the voice of reason, who is listening to her children, but also knowing what's right for them. We have Mr. Hillard in this episode, who very much is almost the inciting incident type character, who he is pushing them to change their life for the better, because without him, essentially, there would be no storyline in this episode. You know, we have Fester and Mama, who are teaching the children different things. Mama's teaching them art and about the French Revolution, and then we have Fester, who is teaching them about your own personal talents, such as lightbulb glowing. We also have Lurch, who is the somewhat comic relief and also somewhat a very powerful enforcer to make things still feel very safe for the children, so the children have a place in there, you know, where to go. And then we have Wednesday, who is kind of the one who we get to see has a heart, who is trying to learn more. And we have Pugsley, who essentially is very handy. And speaking of hands, we also have Thing, who is also a very fun comic relief character. So despite most sitcoms only having like 6 characters normally, this cast of about 8 or so is very well used and very well utilized. There's not a lot of people just hanging around doing nothing. Everybody has some reason to be there and drive the plot forward. So overall, the pilot of The Addams Family is very well written and very well designed, especially because like it does have such a long legacy coming after it. It's so cool that it did start off in such a nice way. I love it. I think it's a very easy rewatch, very fun show to rewatch and kind of dissect and digest. So make sure you follow and like for more Addams Family content just like this and more film content in general. Comment down below who your favorite Addams Family member is. I love Wednesday. Like Wednesday will always be my favorite. I grew up on Wednesday, was like everything. So let me know down below who's your favorite Addams Family member. Okay, bye. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. Da da dum. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. The creepy and the kooky, they're all together ooky. I'm serious and spooky. The Addams Family. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. Da da dum. You know the one. Everyone knows that song. At least I hope you do. If not,